They don't care what you know until they know you care. And so it is with that in mind, with your health in mind, and with the health of those that you reach, that I present this morning. And I will start with this information. I feel so short up here, like I'm blocked, but anyway, I want to, okay, so bring this up. I don't want that one, so how do I get there? This is how I get there. This is a grain of wheat, actually a grain of any grain, illustration of any grain. You have the bran, which is the outer coating. You have the endosperm, which is the primary part of it. And you have the germ. And in the 1800s, the local mills would grind the grain for the villagers, and all three parts would be ground. And that retained all the nutrients, it retained all the vitamins and minerals of the grain itself. But it also meant that the grain would have to be used, the flour that was ground, would have to be used relatively quickly because of the oil in it. It would go rancid. And so you might get 2 weeks out of it, maybe 3 weeks if you could keep it cool and dry, but you would be risking the rancidity of it. So in the 1870s, the food scientists learned that if you will get rid of the germ, you'll get rid of the rancidity, and the flour would last longer. And so what they would do is they would grind it in order to get rid of the bran and the germ, and then it would last a lot longer on the shelves, and they would be able to sell more of it because they wouldn't have to be worried about people getting to the store or, complaining because the flour was rancid and they'd have to take it back. So in the 1870s, they started milling the grain and selling it only with the endosperm in it, without the bran and without the germ. The problem was that by the 1920s, disease in Americans had increased greatly. Diseases such as pellagra, which is a deficiency of B3, and it took another 10 years till the 1930s for them to trace what has caused this upsurge in diseases in Americans. And it turned out they finally traced it to the flour and what had been removed from the flour. And so the solution was not to go back to the original, millings. The solution was to add back into the flour what they had taken out of it. Well, what they had removed was what God initially put in, the minerals and the vitamins, and so they used chemically designed, poor quality vitamins and minerals that they put back into the flour. And they called it enriched. And so it was rich already, but now it is enriched because they're basically an admission of what they removed and they're replacing. Not only that, but some of the flour companies pumped chlorine gas through the flour in order to make it whiter and softer. And that was another problem because although some of the chlorine, it was pumped through it, some of the chlorine remained in the flour, and now we also have the brand name, the flour advertised as unbleached, which means that that particular flour didn't have the chlorine pumped through it. So we have these wonderful sounding terms of unbleached and enriched, but now you know the background behind it. It's because the wheat has been so devitalized that they had to do something to prevent the disease from spreading. So anyway, other flours, more recently in the 1970s, the bread dough that is sold commercially, they have been permitted in the 1970s by the FDA to add potassium bromide to it. Potassium bromide is a dough conditioner, which, however, attaches itself to iodine receptors. And while the body doesn't need bromide, it does need iodine. But since the bromide has been added to it, it has blocked the uptake of iodine in your bodies, and most people in this country are quite deficient in iodine. So we have a major problem. But one of the important messages at this point is read your labels. And if you're reading enriched and unbleached and bromated, now you have a better idea of what that means. But I want you to see about this iodine, because this is critical. This book, Iodine Crisis, was written by a lady who recovered from breast cancer by addressing her own iodine deficiency. And by the way, this relationship between the iodine and breast cancer, it used to be, and with the bromide added to the bread, it used to be in, 1963, that the risk of breast cancer in women was 1 in 20. In the year 2006, it is now 1 in 7 or 8 women. It has adulterated us that much. So it is a serious concern. And this lady learned about it, and that fact came from her book, as a matter of fact. But not only did she recover from breast cancer, but in her book there are anecdotal reports of people recovering from a wide range of illnesses. Age-related hearing loss, heart palpitations, candida, fibrocystic breasts, allergies, fatigue, prostate problems, hair loss, bladder issues, hypothyroid, varicose veins, etc., etc. So I encourage you to read this book, because the iodine deficiency is rampant in this country. And if you don't want to buy it, then ask your library for it, ask them to order it, or try it on interlibrary loan. But I want you to hear about this iodine issue, because it is incredibly serious. This is in China. It is in a province in China where iodine deficiency is very, very serious. In this area of China, severe mental retardation is rampant, miscarriages are common, high infant mortality and stillbirths are common, stunted growth to the point where adults have no more stature than children, and 5-year-olds have the size of toddlers. Deafness affects much of the population. Those who don't have severe mental retardation are dull-eyed, they are slow of hearing, and this section of China is known as the village of idiots due to the mental retardation rate. The livestock there, which is a source of their food, is similarly feeble. Stillbirths are common. And that results in the province being desperately poor as well as severely retarded. And there were teams that went into China to try to figure out, how can we help these people? How can we get iodine to them? Because culturally and politically, iodized salt was out of the question. So how do we help them? And the screen shows what the result is. And it's still going on today, by the way. They will build a makeshift bridge. You can see the design of the bridge. And they put this is an irrigation canal in China, and they put a 55-gallon drum over the irrigation ditch, and they filled it with an iodine concentration. And they have IV tubes and valves connected to it, and they drip iodine into the irrigation ditch. And they figure that the plants will take up the iodine, and the animals will eat those plants, and when the people eat the milk or the cheese or the flesh of these animals, they will get iodine in that way. And it has been successful. The infant mortality rate has dropped by 50%. Sheep production has increased 40%, fewer stillbirths. The height of children has increased 4 inches. Stillborn animals and miscarriages reduced by 50%. And here's what I think is the most amazing part, which is the average intelligence of the children, their IQs, have increased by 16 points. Now, if the average American is deficient in iodine, and getting for these Chinese people to have their IQs increase by 16 points, and if Americans start getting iodine, what will happen with their IQs? I think that's an incredible incentive. It resulted in about 6 cents per person, this method that you see on the screen. In Zaire, mental retardation is so devastating that there was a man whose IQ was estimated at 58 points, severe. The average American intelligence is 98 points. The average IQ is 98 points. So this man was so retarded he could not get it into his head that he had to wear clothing. And so he was 58 years old. His parents were constantly chasing him down, getting him back inside because, I can't have an adult man running around naked. Well, the researchers found this out. They go into the villages and they determine what the village needs, water or whatever. But in this case, iodine was needed. He was given a shot of iodine mixed with poppy seed extract, poppy seed oil. That man was able to learn to wear clothes and became employable, if you can imagine, just with the addition of iodine. Some countries like India are so serious about it. By the way, they're so serious about it that South Carolina in 1936 had on their license plates the iodine state because it was known. In India, it is a jail sentence, if you are caught selling or transporting uniodized salt. And I'll tell you now, even iodized salt is hardly an ideal way to get your iodine. There are better ways. And so what are some sources? Well, most of them are either seaweed or else they are seafood, shrimp, lobster, tuna, and also from dairy and eggs. The problem with the seaweed, depending on where it is harvested, because although you're not going to see it in the news, Fukushima is still putting out its radioactive wastes. They have no alternative. And so you might want to, if you're going to buy seaweed, it's a wonderful source, but check where it was harvested. And so the sources for vegetarians and vegans is, of course, seaweed from the Atlantic, hard-boiled eggs, lima beans, prunes, and corn. Now, these are partial, but if you eat a regular, varied diet, you will get some. But I'm going to tell you that supplementation is actually a wise move. In the body, the iodine is stored primarily in the breast and in the thyroid. And the thyroid is responsible for hormones playing a role in your life. For example, the thyroid and its hormones have to do with absorption of nutrients from the stomach. Calcium homeostasis, which is connected to osteoporosis. The breakdown of glucose and fats, it increases breathing rate. That has some potential if you know anyone suffering from sleep apnea. It increases the temperature of the body if you're always cold. It increases blood flow and circulation, etc. I can go on and on. And you're welcome again to my notes. And by the way, there is a clipboard here. And if you want any of my notes from last night or today, I will give you my articles. I'll give you the reference books and things that I've used. All you need to do is give me your name and your email address, and I will make sure that you have this information. It isn't complete because I've read the books, etc., but whatever I have, on my laptop, I will forward to you so that you have it as a reference. And so the bottom line is that iodine is critically important, and I'm going to, just this lady who wrote the book, she's been getting feedback from people of these problems that I'm going to list being greatly helped or eliminated. And this is, and I read you some of them: mood and energy improved, fertility, varicose veins, sexual life restored, endometriosis, Hashimoto's disease, fibromyalgia, AFib, dry eyes, hypothyroid, bladder issues, and so on. So I'm hoping to hit one of these things for some of you so that you'll say, okay, I'll check into this. But there are two quotes from this book that I particularly want you to know about, and this is from a doctor who also has a master's in public health. He says, we know from world studies that if you give iodine during pregnancy, the babies that come out are usually 20 to 30 points higher in IQ than their parents. Also, the absence of iodine in the human body is a promoter of cancer. So this is serious information. But our topic, getting back to wheat, which is where we started, is that you now know what enriched and unbleached means. This lady who found out about what was in had been removed from wheat, she had been baking bread, but she said, or she had been buying bread, but she said, from now on, I'm going to start making my own bread. And she started buying her own organic wheat, and she would mill her own bread as needed, so the rancidity was not a problem. And she had some incredible results. Within 1 day of eating her own bread, the first day her lifelong bowel problems disappeared forever. Within a week, she had better focus and more energy. Within a month, her craving for sweets went away. Her kids' runny noses and ear infections disappeared, and while they still got colds, they only lasted a shorter time. And she said on top of that, the bread tasted absolutely great. And because of all these good things, she said requests that she make bread for different people came in. And so she did for a while, but she realized, I can't keep on doing this because the requests are increasing. So she and her husband started a business where they sell the grains and they sell the bread mills, or the grain mills rather. So anyway, she said as a result of this freshly milled grain, she said there were some people with celiac disease or gluten intolerance who could eat the bread again. So they're eating what God provided in the grain rather than what man has provided. Now, one other benefit is she said, this bread is so filling that the urge to snack between meals is also gone, which means a bottom line savings of their food bill because she's not buying snack food and she's spending less time cooking. And if you recall, if you buy a box of snack crackers on sale for $5 and it's only 4 ounces, and you take that up to 16 ounces a pound, you're paying $20 a pound for snack crackers. So this is a whole lot better nutrition. The problem is that the wheat that she is using, she didn't identify, and it may well be that it's modern wheat. And modern wheat is not without its own problems. President Trump has recently passed a bill, an executive order actually, mandating that glyphosate production be increased in this country so that we're not dependent on other countries for a glyphosate supply. I don't know, he doesn't seem to know about the damage that glyphosate can do, but we're going to get into that also later today, because it's been connected with autism, it's been connected with actual physical breakdown. There's a documentary out called Secret Ingredients, and it focuses on a family of five, all five among the five of them, 21 different diseases. The mother had become so debilitated she was wheelchair bound. One son was diagnosed with autism. Another son had severe skin issues, skin rashes. I forget what the father had and the other son. But anyway, she determined she was getting nowhere. She got to the point of being wheelchair bound, and she said, I'm not going to survive this if it continues on this course. So she started reading, and they dropped all genetically engineered, all glyphosate sprayed grains. They ate only organic, and she ended up out of the wheelchair. The son no longer was autistic. The son with skin issues, no more problems. These are serious, usually lifelong issues for people. And that is how serious this is and how important it is that we get the word out. And this is, in addition to the glyphosate being sprayed on it, there is the matter of the increased gluten content of the modern wheat. It's up to 50% more gluten than the Lord's original design. So far, as of 2020, the wheat grown in this U.S. is not genetically engineered, but there have been test plots grown, and I don't know if or when it will be. But there are at least 160 diseases connected to modern wheat consumption. 160. And this whole issue is becoming a political hot potato, so this is basically, we're not going to get into the FDA on this, but we'll get into today's message, which began with my running across this book called Wheat Belly, and it's called Lose the Wheat, Lose the Belly. And this doctor was a cardiologist, but he had people coming to him who were diabetic and pre-diabetic. And because with diabetes, you sometimes end up with heart issues, and they were coming to him like, how do I keep my heart healthy while I'm trying to deal with diabetes? And this is part of what he showed them. He said the glycemic index measures how something elevates our insulin levels. The higher our insulin levels, the more our bodies store fat, both internally around the organs and externally, visibly, in belly fat and obesity. Belly fat, weight gain, and obesity. Elevated insulin levels also increase the likelihood of developing diabetes or insulin resistance with all their complications and other related illnesses. So he said, 2 slices of modern whole wheat bread raise blood sugar levels higher than nearly all other known foods. It has a higher glycemic index than table sugar, 72 versus 59. And so this is obviously a major issue. And there's another issue too, in that the gluten contains a protein called gliadin, which is a protein that is not usable by the body. It's not like our normal diet of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. This protein is unique to wheat, and it is harmful to the body, to the gut. And the issue then is, if it's harmful to the gut, then it's harmful to the brain, because there is a gut-brain connection called the vagus nerve. And that means that if the brain is unhappy for whatever reason, the gut suffers along with it. And if the gut suffers, the brain suffers with it as well. And Satan has really corrupted this agency. But if we're trying to reach people with the gospel of peace, and they're affected by wheat, they're going to have a difficult time concentrating on what you say, and a hard time being convicted. So, and not only that, but this wheat protein gliadin is an appetite appetite stimulant. It converts to a morphine-like compound, and it attaches to the morphine receptors. So the same way that bromide attaches to the iodine receptors, this gliadin attaches to the morphine receptors in the brain, which causes a desire for more of that same comfort food, more of that wheat, or simply more food, which results in weight gain. So we continue with this author of this book, Wheat Belly. He wrote, "A high wheat diet has been linked to obesity, digestive diseases, arthritis, diabetes, dementia, and heart disease. Also lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, insulin resistance, osteoporosis." Decades of selective breeding and hybridization by the food industry to increase yield and confer certain baking and aesthetic characteristics on flour, softer, more moist, have created new proteins in wheat that the human body isn't designed to handle. The gluten protein in modern wheat is different in structure from the gluten in older forms of wheat. In fact, the structure of modern gluten is something that humans have never before experienced. And so even cattle can't handle wheat grain, modern wheat grain that is fed to them. Whether it's the glyphosate or the combination of the modern wheat, what they're fed is not the healthy form of grass that they normally eat, but it is the seed form of it that they're not designed to eat isolated. And so the seed form is so acidic that the cattle develop severe acidosis, they develop abscesses in their liver, and also infections. Feeding wheat to cattle requires some caution, and this is the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs. It requires some caution as it tends to be more apt than other cereal grains to cause acute indigestion in animals which are unadapted to it. The primary problem appears to be the high gluten content, of which wheat in the rumen, which is the first compartment of a cow's stomach, can result in a pasty consistency to the rumen contents and reduced rumen, which means the inability to get the rumen out of that first compartment and ultimately out of the body. It ends up as a paste in there. So it has difficulty improperly digesting it, and the animals end up with liver abscesses. And so there's one woman, getting back to the idea of the damage of this gluten, the excess gluten. The lady had listened to a radio program about celiac disease. Prior to listening to it, she had been losing her ability to focus. She said, "I could not have written a letter because by the time I got to the end of the paragraph, I would have forgotten what I was trying to say." She couldn't remember names. She couldn't remember faces. She asked her doctor to test her for Alzheimer's because she thought she was coming down with Alzheimer's. Then she heard about gluten, and she decided to test herself. For 1 week, she ate nothing but rice and vegetables. Her brain fog disappeared. Her ability to concentrate returned. She could write, she could work, she could remember names. It affected her so profoundly. But it affected her only neurologically. She had no other symptoms, but she was intolerant of this. And so we go on to who or what is behind this. Who predicts, this is the wrong one, but celiac disease should be considered when people start having trouble thinking, doing simple math, or remembering things. And I remember my mother had Alzheimer's, and the first clue was when I went to visit, she asked me to balance her checkbook because she was no longer able to do it. And it was basically very simple to do, but she could no longer do it, a normal task. Okay. We also know a World Authority on Gluten Sensitivity reported in Lancet Medical Journal that gluten sensitivity can actually be at times exclusively a neurological disease. No gastrointestinal problems whatsoever, only thinking and memory issues. And so, let me go to a different article here, because there is more information here. And again, I will ship these to you. Simply sign your name and your email address, and I will send these to you. Celiac disease is also known as gluten intolerance. Celiac normally is a more severe form of it with intense pain in the gut. Gluten intolerance manifests itself in other ways, such as brain fog, digestive upset, etc. But what it results in many cases, in addition to the physical symptoms, is your inability to assimilate the nutrients from your food because it has damaged your gut lining so badly. And it is now known that one of the causes of osteoporosis is the inability of the body to metabolize and assimilate the calcium out of the food. It is that serious. It results in anemia, the inability to get the iron out of the food, skin rashes, severe headaches, and so on. Inability to synthesize vitamin D, which is a crucial, vitamin D actually isn't even a vitamin, it's a hormone, but it's the inability to synthesize that, inability to absorb minerals, etc. So, we have you saw the research from the Mayo Clinic. There were 2 cases of cognitive decline that were reversed simply by taking people off gluten in their diet. And of course, it's always easier to prevent a problem than it is to restore it. So the idea is, don't eat modern wheat, okay? I'll give you a third one. Research in Israel have described neurological problems in 51% of children with gluten sensitivity. And they've also described a link between gluten sensitivity and ADHD. So, let me find it. Okay, another one. There is a strong relationship between celiac disease and declining brain function. And if you couple this with the iodine information that you just used, not only can you stop declining brain function, but you can improve brain function. Second one, authors described coincidental problems of both gastrointestinal as well as brain function in a surprisingly high number of individuals. Lastly, celiac disease was never the initial clinical diagnosis. Alzheimer's was, or Parkinson's was, but they never thought to check for celiac disease. And they call this, if it's celiac disease, they call it treatable dementia. My mom was never tested. She grew up eating homemade bread. For all the years that she was married to my dad, she would make homemade bread from white flour. And I often wonder if this was why she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and if it could have been reversed. There was a study done of patients in a nursing home, in the Alzheimer wing of the nursing home. And they did an experiment with those people and withheld the bread that they were feeding them and all other sources of gluten. And some of those dementia patients were able to go home because it was entirely due to gluten. That is how profoundly important this information is. So, anyway, yeast may make, let me go one more. Senile memory loss. But When there is no wheat gluten eaten for 3 months, this was another study, over 70% of the people in the study showed marked improvement in memory. That is quite significant. And for some people, the yeast itself may be a problem, but we have counsel about yeast and when to eat it. This is from the writings from Counsels and Diets on Foods and Ministry of Healing. So the bread should be so thoroughly baked that the yeast germ shall be destroyed. When hot or new, yeast-raised breads of any kind are difficult of digestion, it should never appear on the table. Fresh rolls without yeast or leaven, meaning baking soda or baking powder, are both wholesome and palatable. Bread, which is 2 or 3 days old, is more healthful than new bread. Okay? And so, there is encouragement for you. The World Health Organization in 2019 gave the warning that dementia will double within 18 years, and that was in 2019, and triple by 2050. Now, I sincerely hope that Jesus has come by then. But we still have the problem now, and we know the problem is increasing. And we know that when there's brain fog or cognitive decline, anyone we try to reach with news about Jesus and the salvation that he offers, they're not going to be able to understand. So, is it gluten sensitivity, or is that the main cause, or is something else to blame as well? What is going on behind this? And here, coming up, is a quote I never saw before, but boy, did it hit home when I saw it. Satan gathered the fallen angels together to devise some way of doing the most possible evil to the human family. One proposition after another was made till finally Satan himself thought of a plan. He would take the fruit of the vine, alcoholism, also wheat and other things given by God as food, and he would convert them into poisons, which would ruin man's physical, mental, and moral powers, and would so overcome the senses that Satan should have full control. Review and Herald, 1901. Now, for us to see, I want you to see what your gut looks like on the inside. This is villi. Okay? Villi are these tiny finger-like projections that line the small intestine. They significantly increase the surface in order to enhance nutrient absorption from food. They're critical. They also block food particles from getting past these villi and then into the bloodstream. The nutrients can go into the bloodstream as they're digested, but they are designed to block food particles from going in there. But when they're damaged, you can see that on the, is it your left? Yeah, on your left, they're normally long and they're close together, but the damaged villi are not as close together and they're shorter as well, which means there is less of a barrier. And that is what gliadin does to the villi in your gut. Okay. There are several, matter of fact, here's another picture of it. On the right now, is healthy villi. And this is an actual slide, microscopic slide of a villi. On the left, you can see they are thinner. There are spaces between them, and the body cannot work as God designed. And one of the scary parts is that the damage from genetically engineered foods tends to be permanent. So it is critical that we buy organic when we can. We can't guarantee it unless we grow it or unless we know who's growing the food and what their farming practices are. But anyway, the damage is permanent. And so when we get to gluten, what are the problems? It damages the intestine, which I already said. It's anti-nutrients. It causes intestinal permeability, called leaky gut, and it causes immune responses. Now, the first one where it damages the intestines. Okay, one of the reasons that gluten or any grain damages the intestines is because grains contain lectins. Lectins are what the plant produces. They're anti-nutrients. They're what the plant produces to keep predators away, to keep insects from eating it. And so when we buy grain, it has those lectins on the grain. Hopefully not glyphosate, but it has the lectins. And these books that I'm reading, Wheat Belly and Grain Brain and so on, they warn about the lectins, and their solution is to eat fewer grains and eat more meat. That is not our way we're going to be going. And so what do you do about those lectins? And the solution is you soak the grains. You soak them to get the lectins off, and you pour off the soak water. I normally soak grains 12 hours. Like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll put the grains in any amount of water, and before I go to bed, I'll pour off the soak water and put more soak water in. And at 1 o'clock the next day, when I'm going to prepare to make dinner, I'll pour off the soak water again and put the final water on in order to make, to prepare the grain. Not only is it lectin reduced in great degree, but it also is a shorter cooking time, which results in less fuel, and lower utility bills. Because by soaking it, you are also beginning the sprouting process, which releases more nutrients in addition to the other benefits. So the second one, number 2, it causes intestinal permeability. When food particles get through the villi and into the bloodstream, it is seen as an invader, and the immune system ramps up in order to counteract the invader, and you get an immune response. And if you keep doing that day after day, meal after meal, you end up with immune difficulties. You end up with autoimmune disorders. Number 3 is it has high concentrations of, how do I want to say it? It attaches to the morphine receptors because it has pharmacologically active receptors, properties, and they attach to the morphine receptors, which makes you feel good. And since this eating of the bread makes you feel good and is delicious, you want more of it. It becomes a comfort food, and people eat more than is wise. This is related to schizophrenia and autism simply by adding to their comfort food. It enhances or continues the autism and the schizophrenia. There are cases where schizophrenia has been reversed by the withdrawal of gluten foods from the diet. And the same with autism. Autistic children are, to be protected from eating gluten. Also, number 4, high in excitotoxins. Do you know that MSG, which is an excitotoxin, is derived from kelp and from wheat? Wheat already has flavor enhancers in it. So we do not need to add more, and it is also a reason to avoid stuff with high gluten. Okay, so why eat wheat? We have this wisdom. This is a common position of people who advise us to eat more meat and fewer grains. How profoundly our diet has diverged from what was until only recently a grain-free diet. Where'd they get that? How do they know we initially had a grain-free diet? And he continues, the body cannot help but remember a time when cereal grains were alien to the diet. Where did that come from? How can they prove that primitive man, Adam and Eve, go all the way back there, how do they know that it was grain-free? Instead, we have this information. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed. Is that not a grain? Also, we have from Testimonies, 3rd volume, God has furnished man with abundant means for gratification of appetite. He spread before him in the products of the earth a bountiful variety of food that is palatable to the taste and nutritious to the system. Of these, our benevolent Heavenly Father says you may freely eat. We may enjoy the fruits, vegetables, and grains. Now, either this writer is off base or the previous slide's author. So we have grains written right into the, human history. And then the last one, a benevolent creator has given them, meaning Adam and Eve, evidence of his goodness and love in providing them, at the beginning with Adam and Eve, with fruit, vegetables, and grains. Okay? So we have grains from the beginning. What they are assuming, these meat-promoting authors, they're good in heart because they're warning us about the grain, but the solution isn't eating meat. Is that they're assuming that to grow grains you have to be an agrarian society, staying in one place, and their view is that humans from the beginning were hunter-gatherers. I don't know where they got that idea either because they can't prove it. But that's their assumption, and I'm thinking, why couldn't God, in his goodness, and we already know he gave us the grains, why couldn't he have forested areas and areas of grasses, and Adam and Eve could stroll wherever they wanted and eat whatever they wanted, with one exception, of course. It is an assumption, it is speculation that we were always hunter-gatherers, because there are grains and fruits that grow wild, and we know that they were provided from the beginning. And so there is something else going on here. There's hybridization, and you can read studies, and part of the problem in some of these studies is that it is not stated what kind of wheat was used in the study as well, because modern wheat does indeed have excess gluten, and it poses a threat to physical and mental health. But there's also the hybridization of corn, and corn also is genetically engineered. Some of you may think that you're escaping all these problems because you're not celiac, and you're not gluten sensitive, and you haven't noticed any stomach problems, any digestive problems. Maybe from time to time you think, what's wrong with my brain? But you need to know that there is something called the celiac iceberg. And it basically means that there is a group of people above the water level that have the severe reactions. I've seen people sink to the ground and clutch their stomach in pain. Because they were celiac. I have met people who are gluten sensitive, and they avoid the gluten grains. But no matter whether you don't have any symptoms or not, you are being affected by this. You can't avoid being affected by this. You're just below the water level. You're just below the radar. A groundbreaking study, 2007, published in the leading international journal on gastroenterology and hepatology. The question, is gliadin, which is the major gluten protein, safe for non-celiacs? And here is the evidence that it's not safe for you either. Researchers took intestinal tissue samples from healthy individuals without celiac diagnosis and from confirmed celiac patients, and exposed them to gluten peptides. The results, all samples, including those from non-celiacs, released the inflammatory cytokine IL-15 in response to wheat gliadin. In plain English, everyone's gut immune system recognizes gluten as a threat to some degree. This is acute versus chronic inflammation. Acute is at the moment, at that particular time. Chronic is happening over and over and over again. A Harvard study reported that chronic inflammation plays a central role in some of the most challenging diseases of our time. It means that the body takes hit after hit after hit without being diagnosed with anything. And those illnesses are rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, asthma, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. The celiac's dramatic reaction is coming to be understood not as an abnormal reaction. The question to be asked is not, what's the matter with you? Why can't you eat gluten? And the question should be, what's the matter with the bread you're trying to eat? That is the issue. And so many of us have asymptomatic gluten sensitivity. Continuing. Okay. Clinicians are recognizing links between wheat and a bewildering array of conditions, often without classic gut symptoms. And I just went through these. Gluten sensitivity has been implicated in neurological disorders like ataxia. I don't know if you know what that is. It's poor muscle control causing clumsy movements. Neuropathy, even some cases of epilepsy and schizophrenia, and psychiatric conditions such as depression, anxiety, that improve on a gluten-free diet. Autoimmune diseases such as type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and psoriasis have all been linked in some patients to wheat consumption. And in fact, the research archive at greenmedinfo.org has cataloged 230 distinct health conditions and adverse effects associated with wheat in the scientific literature, from the obvious, celiac and allergy, to the surprising, schizophrenia, heart disease, liver inflammation, and so on. Now, we're going on to now another factor in this whole matter, which is glyphosate. Let me find my notes on that. Okay, so we're getting to the difference between. I'm going to hold off on glyphosate for a second because I forgot a point. They did a study on introducing into the body an infectious element, a bacteria, and they also then introduced an infectious element, which is a portion of this gliadin. And here is what they found between the bacteria and the wheat gluten. Both an infectious microbe and a fragment of wheat gluten evade barriers. They resist degradation from cooking and digestion. You can't get rid of it by cooking it. They trigger immune alarms, and they damage tissue in celiac patients, and we also now have shown that it damages in you. Okay? If you remove the gluten, you have improved digestive health, autoimmune disease relief, metabolic and weight benefits, mental and neurological health, overall inflammation down. Okay, we get to glyphosate. The question is the problem actually glyphosate, or can it possibly be the wheat? Or is it actually a double whammy? So, both glyphosate and I wrote celiac sufferers, but it's actually going to be any gluten sufferers once it reaches the breaking point. Inability to detoxify toxins, or activate vitamin D3, or maintain adequate bile and sulfate supplies. If you can't do that, it means you're going to be vitamin D deficient. It's an essential hormone for the body. If it prevents you from producing adequate bile for the stomach, for the gut ability to digest your food, then you can't get the nutrients out of your food either. Needed minerals are chelated from our bodies. Glyphosate does this. Increased risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, reproductive issues, infertility being one of them, organ failure, especially the kidneys. And so, what do we do about all this? What can be done? We are neither helpless nor hopeless. There are 3 other varieties of wheat for bread making. There's einkorn. Jovial is a preferred brand because it is sourced from Italy. Khorasan wheat. The brand name normally known is Kamut, but the actual wheat variety is Khorasan. It's either white, which is the fine ground, or it's a whole grain, it's coarser, but it has the germ in it. Emmer is another one, it's also called farro, and there's also spelt. There are also gluten-free things that you can eat. These, by the way, are still gluten. They're still wheat. So if you are particularly sensitive or you know someone who is, you may want to avoid these also. And there are totally gluten-free grains, like here, Happy Camper brand. You can buy online or through Azure the Happy Campers bread. They are small loaves, they are expensive, they're delicious, but they can perhaps get you through the transition period. And there's a source, greenmedinfo.com, for other information about this. And there are pseudo grains. These are not grass-based. Buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, and sorghum. They are delicious. Quinoa has the highest protein content of any grain. At our fellowship meals, lately, somebody brought a quinoa dish and introduced into it simply sliced cucumbers, sliced avocados, squeezed 2 lemons over the top. It was outstanding. Someone else can mix sorghum, which was thoroughly cooked. Sorghum is, you have to cook it quite a while. Sorghum, and mixed in with it grated carrots, mixed in with it mayonnaise, vegan mayo, served it that way. It's delicious. So I'm encouraging you to start experimenting with these things. And now, approaching the end, I would simply want to give you some stories, some encouragement about what you've been hearing, because I'm going to show you some success stories. And I want to get to my notes in that section so I don't miss any, because they're kind of interesting. First is a friend. She is a true bread lover, and she makes her own bread with a bread maker. And she had been using modern wheat, and she said she would eat a couple of pieces and she'd end up with brain fog, to the point where it was difficult to do her job. She said, "What is the matter with me?" She has since quit eating modern wheat. She has switched to Khorasan wheat. She no longer has brain fog because modern wheat's gluten is so much higher that she can handle some of it. Another couple, they have been eating their own homemade modern wheat bread, and they eat with a Kleenex box on the table because eating the bread makes their nose run. And I have another friend who constantly had a box of Kleenex on the table for the same reason. And once you get off the modern wheat, the sniffles go away. Another one, this one was, I thought, a really important one. The guy is about 6'5". He is at least 300 pounds, and he recently developed a nodule on his thyroid gland. He said it was 6 millimeters long, and it had begun to press against his larynx. And he said it already had begun starting to change his voice. But what he had read was also, if it gets big enough, it will also interfere with his ability to breathe. And so he had heard this presentation on wheat, but kind of put it aside. But once he got that nodule on his thyroid, he decided maybe I'd better pay attention. So he got off all wheat and all food colorings, and the nodule has shrunk to the point where he is no longer fearful, and he's hopeful that it will continue to shrink and then ultimately disappear. There is another friend. When one of the friends whose runny nose quit happening when she was eating wheat, she also would get chest pain after eating bread. And the chest pain has disappeared since they stopped eating bread made from modern wheat. And now I want you to see, you're going to get a kick out of this one. This is Bob, okay? This is Bob before he gave up wheat, okay? And this is after 2 weeks of being wheat-free, dairy-free, sugar-free. Waist is 47. Chest is 44 1/4, and this is after 2 weeks. This is Bob sideways, same thing. This is Bob 2 months later. Do you notice the difference? Wait a minute, there and there. 2 months later, he has lost that much. I asked about other areas of progress, and his wife wrote to me, and I want you to hear what his wife wrote because it's wonderful. Bob has had clearer thinking and more energy. Also, he had been walking like an old man, slow, like every step was an effort. He's walking much better now. We have noticed that the smallest amount of regular wheat sets him back. And she continued. Oops, don't want you. Hang on a second. I don't want you to see that one yet. Okay, yes I do. Okay, this is a before and after of a lady who went off all wheat, all dairy, all sugar. And this is the side view. This is what happened in 4 months. And what she wrote is astonishing. She wrote, almost immediately after abstaining from wheat, gluten basically, dairy and sugar, all of the inflammation in my joints went away completely. Also, I had arthritis in my thumbs. I'd been suffering with this for several years, and as time wore on, the pain seemed to increase. I had been to a bone and joint specialist. He gave me braces to wear on my thumbs for support. And he offered cortisone shots or surgery as an option. I was contemplating those options at some point. But when I cut off the wheat gluten, the dairy, and the sugar, and she said I'll shorten it to WDS, the pain in my thumbs was gone, completely gone. I had been on blood pressure medication for several years. High blood pressure runs in my family. When I cut out the wheat, dairy, sugar, my blood pressure came down. I got completely off my blood pressure medication. I lost a total of 38 pounds in 4 months. I cut out a lot of calories along with cutting out wheat, dairy, and sugar. I went to 2 meals a day. I quit eating after 7 p.m., and I didn't eat late at night anymore. What really helped me with not eating late at night was cutting out all mindless media, because you sit there and you want to do something, and the tendency is to eat. She wrote, sugary calories late at night and TV went hand in hand. Cutting out the wheat, dairy, sugar, and the mindless media skyrocketed my mental clarity, my devotional time, and my communication with my Heavenly Father. Amen. My 5 senses were sharpened and allowed me to really hear from heaven. Amen. Of all the things that she said, she was most excited about this one. She also added, I had new energy that I hadn't had for years. This lady is a school bus driver. She said, I used to comment all the time that I felt like an old person getting up and down the steps of my bus. After I cut out wheat, dairy, and sugar, I didn't feel like an old person anymore. I could get up and down in my school bus with no pain. I'm working out at the gym and doing exercises that were hard for me before, but now easy. I've joined a fitness strength conditioning class and I feel invigorated. Whenever I add wheat, dairy, and sugar back into my diet, I immediately start to feel the negative effects of inflammation in my joints. It wreaks havoc on my body. It's not easy to always resist the temptation of sugary foods or wheat or dairy, but having that transformation that I've had and feeling young again makes it easier to resist knowing how good I can feel. I tell everyone now that one of the funnest things that I can do now that I haven't been able to do for decades is to sit crisscross applesauce, meaning sit on the floor with your legs crossed, like a child. Now that she's older, she can do what she couldn't do when she was younger. Imagine that. And at holidays and other gatherings, sometimes I've indulged in favorite foods and always regretted it. Besides the inflammation that inevitably follows, the sweets don't taste as good as they used to. I'm always disappointed, so why bother eating them? That was the end of her quotes. Because of the close connection between mind and body via the vagus nerve, and you'll hear more about the vagus nerve today, when the mind is healthy, that health contributes to the health of the physical body. Likewise, when physical health is fostered, a good diet, eat, sleep, and wake at optimal times, outdoor exercise, the New Start program basically, one's mental state and religious life also prosper. That was the lady's experience. Enhanced spiritual life is the best of her improvements. And so, the last slide is my wish and John's wish to you as well. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth.